Good morning. Uh, Thanks to everyone for joining us. My name is Gregory Ormsby Maury. I'm the Outreach Coordinator at the Center for Agroforestry at the University of Missouri. And this is the Agroforestry in Action webinar series. Our guest today, Antonio de Araujo, will be speaking to us about agroforestry in southern Brazil. And we're very pleased to have Tony with us. Good morning, Tony.
Good morning.
Yeah, and thanks to everyone who's just now signing in. The webinar presentation will run about 40 to 45 minutes, and then we should have some time for question and answers after that. So scheduled time about an hour. If we're having a lively discussion, we may continue beyond that, but after about a 45-minute presentation, we'll open up a dialog box where the participants can enter questions. So again, our speaker this morning, Antonio J. de Araujo. Antonio is, he's a friend of the Center for Agroforestry and has been working in agroforestry and forestry fields for many, many years, decades. Between 1998 and 2014, Antonio served as professor of forestry and chairman of the department at the Central Western Paraná State University. That's UniCentro. There, he established a new forestry undergraduate, a master's, and a doctorate program. In fact, programs that reached #1 ranking in Brazil. Also, between 1970 and 2002, he also held positions of professor and senior professor of forestry and director of the School of Forestry and University Vice President at the Federal University of Paraná, UFPR. He was also a visiting professor for many years in the 90s at Michigan State University at the Department of Forestry. And he's established study abroad and academic exchange programs between multiple countries, between Brazil, USA, Japan, and has conducted research and consults on a wide range of international forestry topics. He's a graduate in his PhD from Michigan State. And he currently consults on a range of international forestry topics. So today we're thrilled to have Tony with us and to learn more about agroforestry in southern Brazil. So with that, Tony, I'll hand it over to you. Good morning, Tony.
Good morning.
Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. I will talk about agroforestry in southern Brazil. And first of all, my thanks to the University of Missouri Center for Agroforestry for the invitation. And also thanks to all participants of this webinar. The objectives of my presentation are to present and discuss agroforestry practices used in southern Brazil with emphasis on alley cropping and silvopasture systems. And after that, offer an outlook of agroforestry practices in southern Brazil. So here are the contents of the presentation. First, an overview of both forestry in Brazil and following agroforestry in Brazil. And then the agroforest systems or practices. As I said, with emphasis in the first two ones, alley cropping and silvopasture. But I also talk a little bit about agropasture and agro-silvopasture and other practices. And finally, the current situation and outlook. Okay. Brazil on this map is in yellow. And okay, let me get the pointer here. Here is the pointer. So here is Brazil. Brazil is the 5th largest country in the world, both by area and population. And it holds the seventh largest GDP. It is larger than continental US and also the largest country in South America. Now, okay. Here is the highlight of Brazil. Okay. This is the political map of Brazil with the regions in different colors. The yellow states, number 25, 26, 27, they are what we call the southern region. These three states are about 222,000 square miles. Just to give you an idea, that is equivalent to 3 times the size of Missouri, like 3 Missouris, or larger than California. And according to Kippen, Brazil hosts the following climatic types: equatorial, here, the equator runs about here, so equatorial, tropical, the blue part, semi-arid, and subtropical, and in southern Brazil, a little bit in the north part, subtropical, and most of it temperate climate. Let's now talk about forestry in Brazil. Forestry in Brazil as an art and science had its beginning in 1960 with the establishment of the National Forest School. That had full support of FAO and the United Nations Development Program, and the focus from the beginning for about 2 decades was on plantation forestry. In American southern pines, mainly loblolly pine, and several species of eucalyptus were the most promising species. They were being tested since the 30s, 40s. So there was a big help from government with fiscal incentives, and an impressive development has occurred. Today, Brazil is the leader in the world in forest productivity. The highest yields in forest plantations you can find in Brazil. And planted forests for cellulose, timber, energy, and other uses are based mainly on pinus and eucalyptus. Plantations of pinus and eucalyptus, they account for more than 92% of the wood market. So the wood industry is really based on these two genus. The area of planted forest in Brazil, according to the Brazilian Institute of Geography and Statistics, is for eucalyptus almost about 7 million hectares. So this is data from 2014 or 2014. And so now I'm pretty sure is over 7 million hectares eucalyptus. Pinus, over 2 million. Other species, 365,000 hectares. So the total forest area, planted forest area, is over 9 million hectares. But this is about only 2% of the total forest area. So the total forest area in Brazil is 463 million hectares. And so about 10 million are planted forests, and the other 98% are native forests. So Pinus taida, loblolly pine, is the major species, grows 2 to 3 times faster in volume than in US. That's about 45 cubic meters per hectare per year. And other species are also planted, like Pinus eliotii, Pinus caribea, all 3 varieties, the caribea, bahamensis, hondurensis, and also Pinus ocarpa. Here we have plus 3 seed tree and a young plantation. And Eucalyptus in Brazil grows 2 to 3 times faster than in Australia also. So that's about 60 cubic meters per hectare per year. And in southern Brazil, mainly, we use these species, grandis, dunii, benthamiae, viminalis, and saligna. Remember, we are talking about southern Brazil. We have frost there, about 20 days of frost a year. Snow is very rare, but in the mountains, okay. But so we need species, conifers or eucalyptus, or also the grasses. They have to be tolerant to frost. So Eucalyptus grandis is the major species among all eucalyptus. And a lot of hybridization has been carried out. And one of the most important is what we call Uru grandis, is Urophylla N grandis. Is the fastest growing eucalyptus. Clonal technology well developed, many clonal testing and many commercial clones being used. And rotation for these plantations they vary from 4 to 7 years for biomass and cellulose. For timber, 15, 20 years. Okay, so forest in Brazil, we can say it is a success. So what are the factors? I pointed here 6 factors to justify or explain that success. First, fiscal incentives by the government. Second, fast technological development of silviculture and management practices. Third, good soils and good climatic conditions. Fourth, genetic tree improvement with choice of species, choice of provenances, hybridization, and clonal propagation technology. And number 5, human resources, increased number of professionals with forest knowledge. Now we have about 66 undergraduate forest programs. So a big growth since 1960. And also, it's important to remember that the low labor wages and lately intensive mechanization of operations, they also contribute for this success of forest plantations in Brazil. Now, let's start talking about agroforestry. Agroforestry as an art and science had its beginning in the 70s with the establishment of agroforest systems in experimental stations and universities, and also the creation of courses as electives in the beginning in forestry curricula in the 80s. Presently, agroforestry is a required course in most forestry programs. There are some very old and traditional agroforest practices in Brazil. Just to name two, Bracatinga is Mimosa escabrella, is a legume tree, and combined with regional crops in the state of Paraná, all three states, southern states, but mainly in Paraná, and erva mate, Ilex paraguariensis, and combined with crops or livestock. They are very old systems, maybe 200 years old. And universities and Embrapa, Embrapa is the Brazilian Agricultural Research Corporation. Both universities and Embrapa, they had a decisive role in the development and adoption of agroforest practices in Brazil. So in the next few slides, I will just review the concepts or the definitions we have for the practices. So alley cropping, Embrapa calls integrated crop forest system. It's a production system integrating crop and forest components through the combination of tree species and agricultural crops, either annual or perennial. Predominant forest components for alley cropping are pinus, eucalyptus, Grevillea robusta, silk oak from Australia, erva mate, yerba mate in Spanish, Ilex paraguariensis, and black wallow, also from Australia, and acacia. The predominant agricultural crops are soybean, corn, wheat, rice, and bean. Silvopasture, or integrated livestock forest system, or as some call forest pasture system, a production system integrating livestock and forest components in combination. Silvopasture systems, they have been adopted by plan design and implementation, or with the introduction of animals in permanent commercial forests, or introduction and or maintenance of forest component, native or exotic in cultivated pastures. In southern Brazil, main winter crops, the grasses, pasture for feeding cattle are lopsided oat, annual ryegrass, and the summer crops are soybean, corn, and bean. Next, agropasture. The integration or integrated crop livestock system. A production system integrating crop and livestock components in rotation, combination, or succession in the same area in a same crop year or multiple years. In the southern half of the state of Rio Grande do Sul, the most common system is agropasture with irrigated rice and beef and dairy cattle breeding. The main perennial pastures include annual ryegrass, white clover, oat, festuca, bird's foot trefoil, and bahia grass. But also now, lately, restoration with native species. And finally, agro-silvopasture, integrated crop, livestock, and forest system, all three components. A production integrating crop, livestock, and forest in rotation, combination, section in the same area. Now let's see some photos and appreciate how these systems are applied. So in this first one, alley cropping, you see young eucalyptus and corn. Corn and young eucalyptus. Well, how young? This eucalyptus may be 1.5 years old from planting. Alley cropping again. We have here corn between alleys of Ilex paraguariensis, erva mate. So about 90,000 landowners, rural properties, they use this system, not only with corn, but with other crops. So that's a good number, 90,000. And just that is just in the southern region, this system is used. Next, alley cropping, soybean between alleys of erva mate, Ilex paraguariensis. And this is very interesting. This is a new system developed by Embrapa. Timbó is this tree here, Atelea glazioviana, and is considered the best manure crop for small farms in southern Brazil. It is perennial. Now, let me get the point here. Well, I missed the pointer. Okay. Well, you see there, Timbó, this Atelea, and they use leaves and small branches as mulch. So, and branches larger than 2 centimeters, about an inch, are used as firewood and produces about 2 pounds of dry matter per year, with about of which this dry matter nitrogen is about 3.1%. So silvopasture, we have here rows of Ilex paraguariensis, the taller tree, and pinto peanut, Arachis pintoi, is a perennial herb capable of fixing nitrogen also, about 300 kilograms of nitrogen per year, is a permanent pasture for intensive grazing. So again, Ilex paraguariensis and in this case, a pasture. So, and now we will see a sequence of a very interesting system is in a little north of the southern region, but also the same thing can be used in southern Brazil. So this is alley cropping, clonal eucalyptus. You see the dark green is the row of eucalyptus and rice. This is in the first year of the system, it's an alley cropping. So the rows of eucalyptus are 10 meters apart. And in this area, it's a very large area, and 38 clones of eucalyptus were studied. It's an experiment in large scale at this company, Votorantim. So in the same area, this is the second year. So in the first year, rice, and now eucalyptus and soybean. Eucalyptus trees are taller, maybe 6, 7 meters height. And after harvesting the soybean, all plant residues are incorporated. And also in the second year, pruning of the trees, because those eucalyptus will be used for logs, for timber, not cellulose. So pruning is needed. And here in the third year, so we see the eucalyptus much taller, and the soybean was already incorporated, and signal grass, Brachiaria, was seeded, and you have now cattle grazing. And also in the third year, a second prune is made. So, and this can be repeated in the fourth, fifth, up to the 11th year. Brachiaria and eucalyptus growing for timber. So in the same area, this older, maybe 9 years, 10 years old eucalyptus, and those clones were Uro grandis, so clones of Urophylla and grandis, and the pasture under the canopy, and previously I said it, rice and soybean. Another silvopasture, Eucalyptus urograndis. You see 2 rows, and then a wider spacing, a wider for grazing, and again 2 other rows of eucalyptus. And this is interesting. It's a silvopasture in the same area, in the same farm. Again, urograndis, and pasture between rows of trees. But note the light crown. So a light crown density, allowing more light to reach the ground. So, and you have a better grazing ground. And that doesn't mean that the production is lower, the timber production is lower. It's just a difference between clones. So clones of eucalyptus, this is a hybrid of Urophylla grandis, and maybe 300, 500 clones were tested, and there is a very good variation. You can find materials like that, and so that highlights the need for research, selecting clones and selecting hybrids. Another silvopasture on the foreground, unprotected. The pasture was damaged by frost, and in the background, the pasture was protected by rows of eucalyptus, and you can notice it is green. Pasture is good and green. Another silvopasture, Eucalyptus, in Porto União, Paraná, state of Paraná. Wide spacing rows of eucalyptus and grass for cattle, dairy cattle. And another silvopasture, Eucalyptus grandis in the same state, my state, state of Paraná. Eucalyptus and cattle, beef, for beef. Another silvopasture, eucalyptus again, and grasses. Another silvopasture, silk oak, grevillea in wide spacing, and this is a different system. It's a very traditional and old system. It's called the faxinal system in southern Brazil. It's a community area of sparse native trees and grassland, which is shared by different landowners without individual fenced lots. So the livestock, cows, horses, pigs, chickens, of all landowners graze openly during the day and return to their barns and sheds in the evening. So usually this faxinal, this forest and pasture, is in the middle, and around this forest area you have the different landowners, different properties where they cultivate soybean and corn in monocultures or not, but the animals, they share this common area. And in this slide, we see timber harvesting of silk oak, Grevillea robusta. And this timber, this species, Grevillea, is very good for furniture. So there is a whole nucleus or arrangement, a productive arrangement of industries in one city in the northern part of Paraná, that the most important timber for them is Grevillea, coming from this silvopasture, or in the beginning, this species was introduced to shading of coffee plantations. And this agro-silvopasture, we can see on the right, erva mate, and we see double line of pine, Pinus taida, and in the center, dwarf elephant grass, Penicetum purpureum. And this is, we can see the three components together. So, talking now about other forest practices. We have seen 4 so far. Number 5, we could include as forest practice windbreaks. So, it's a production system integrating crops or livestock with trees for the purpose of reducing wind effects, used to protect crops or livestock, and characterized by wide spacing between rows of trees. And in southern Brazil, 3 species used are silk oak, Eucalyptus pinus, and 2 species of cupressus, Lusitanica and Macrocarpa. In the background, you see the windbreak of Eucalyptus. This is in the Pampas region. Pampas is in the southernmost state in Rio Grande do Sul. Pampas are natural grasslands. And so, of course, they use for raising cattle mainly. But is in southern part, so there are winds, strong winds from the Andes and Antarctica that they come up, passing through Argentina and Uruguay and enter Brazil by Rio Grande do Sul. And so these windbreaks, they protected the cattle. And also the wood can be used for fences and farm construction. And so other forest practices. We have a Federal Forest Act. The old one was passed in 65, and a new law was passed in 2012, so 4 years ago, replacing the previous one. But in both laws, there is a requirement to protection or restoration of permanent preservation areas, which includes, there are many definitions, many kinds of preservation areas, but one of the most important is the riparian forests. And also in this law, what's called legal reserves. So forest woodlots must be preserved in each property. So in southern Brazil, 20% of each farm or small farm, big farm, 20% has to be preserved as forest. Or in many cases, if deforestation has happened, then you have to restore that 20%. So the riparian, in Portuguese we call mata ciliar. The riparian forest is the forest or other vegetation adjacent to bodies of water, rivers, streams, ponds, lakes, and sources. Around sources is 50 meters radius. So, and legal reserve is the area of forest on every rural property where forest must be maintained or restored. The cultivation of high value specialty crops under the protection of a forest canopy that has been modified to provide the correct shade level, that is the definition of forest farming, is incipient in Brazil. However, it has great potential for use in the restoration of legal reserves, because in legal reserves, you can, if you are restoring legal reserve, you can start with an agroforest system. The law allows that. And later, you just cut, harvest the trees. If they are exotic, they cannot stay. And then you have the native forest restored. So there is a role for agroforest practices in restoration of legal reserves. So just to show you, on the left, you see a source of a river and the radius of 50 meters, and the riparian forest, the width on each side varies according to the width of the river. So from a minimum of 30 meters each side for rivers with less than 10 meters wide to 500 meters on each side for rivers above 600 meters wide. So now let's talk a little bit about the current situation and perspectives of agroforestry practice in southern Brazil. Approximately 1.6 to 2 million hectares currently use different formats of agroforestry strategies, and it is estimated that they will be adopted in further 20 million hectares over the following 20 years. This is a goal. So this is an objective that Embrapa has put, and it will depend on how we proceed, if we will reach or not. Currently about 2 million, and the objective is 10 times more in the next 20 years. So some barriers for adoption. So we have some barriers that I will discuss briefly. They are economic, including here the investment and the low return. They are operational barriers, the complexity and risks, and they are cultural, unfamiliarity and erroneous perceptions. And these barriers, they are more in place or more important for small landowners because, you know, capital and knowledge is a problem for small landowners. This will require the implementation of public policies to foster production, such as greater offer of credit, lower interest rates, longer payment periods, guaranteed minimum prices, lower taxation of products and inputs, widespread and efficient agricultural insurance, as well as compensation for environmental services. That is starting now, this compensation for environmental services. And also necessary to overcome the barriers is research, of course, aiming at answers, not about the benefits. Everybody knows, and the literature is full of papers about benefits of agroforestry practices. We need research on the processes and mechanisms for adoption. Environmental agronomic benefits are well known. And also human resources. We need people, professionals with agroforestry knowledge, and extension. We need to reach the farmers, outreach projects, and overcoming misperceptions and ignorance of available technologies. Sustainable agroforest systems can be applicable to any property size. And agroforest systems are important for large rural entrepreneurs, not only for small landowners, as I was discussing previously, but they are very important for large rural entrepreneurs. And I mean the beef, dairy, grains, cellulose, and timber industries. They are an opportunity for large investments to sustainably produce returns under unfavorable socio-economic scenarios. They also present versatility to generate profit on different market segments, such as grains, cattle, milk, wood, and biomass for energy. And on April 29th, 2013, so just 3 years ago, a new law was passed, was ratified, creating the National Integration Crop Livestock Forest Policy. That's the name of the law. The legislation's objectives include basically three objectives: sustainably improve productivity, product quality, and agricultural income by adopting integrated systems to exploit crop, livestock, and forests in deforested areas and as an alternative to traditional monoculture. Second, to mitigate deforestation and contribute to the conservation of permanent preservation areas and legal reserves. I just discussed that previously. And third, to foster new land use models combining sustainable agribusiness and environmental conservation. So you can see that we could call that law the agroforestry law, but in Brazil they call the National Integration Crop Livestock Forest Policy, and it has a very good emphasis on trees combined with agricultural crops and livestock. And introduction of the forest component in agropasture activity will certainly result in complementary benefits. Agriculture and livestock offset the negative cash flow during the growing period of the forest investment. Trees will incorporate into the system important environmental benefits in terms of environmental sustainability. That means animal comfort, carbon fixation, etc., and also economic sustainability, conservation of the forests, and social sustainability, since the input of resources distributed over time allows the producers and their successors to encourage the permanence of youngsters in rural areas. And that is a problem in Brazil. Many young people are going to big cities and leaving for good the rural area. So we are approaching the end. I mentioned here the four most important programs with loans or credit lines for farmers. So the first one, the oldest one, is PRONAF. PRONAF is a national program for the strengthening of family agriculture. PRONAF is older, but since 2007, includes agroforest systems as an option for credit. PROPFLORA is the commercial planting program and restoration of forests, also includes agroforestry, is mainly for plantation forestry, but you can do also agroforestry with money or credit from this program. The third one is PRODUSA, stimulus program for sustainable production. And finally, a new one running since, is 2010, not 2020. Since 2010, this program is running, is a low carbon agriculture program, 5.5% annual percent rate for the loan and repayment in 15 years. So, and to end, I will show you a few slides about the extension part of all this. So this is what they call a field day, station 4. You can see timber. There was done thinning there on a silvopasture system. The trees you see there are Grevillea robusta, and on the right, in the center, you see one of my friends there in Brazil giving a talk Dr. Porfirio. And on the right, you see Renato. He's the executive secretary for the state of Paraná, um, the state management group for the ABC program, the low carbon agriculture. Um, so farmers are invited to go to a property that is ahead of most of neighbors. So, and again, a field day, and you see grevillea, robusta on wide spacing, and you see also logs of grevillea for timber. And finally, in the same extension program or same extension activity, you see grevillea, silk oak on wide spacing, and cattle. Finally, I think we are pretty good on the timing. I am very grateful to the Center for Agroforestry at the University of Missouri for the invitation to present this webinar. A special thanks to Gregory, the Education and Outreach Coordinator, to Dr. Michael Gold and Dr. Shibu Joseph, respectively Assistant Director and Director of the Center for Agroforestry. I'm also in debt to my good friends and colleagues in Brazil, Dr. Jarbas Shimizu, Dr. Moacir Medrado, both from Embrapa, and also Dr. Gabriela Gomes, a colleague in the Forestry Department, for the photographs and other materials they provided. And thank you. Thank you very much for your attention. I hope I could give you in this short time an idea what's going on there. And feel free in the future to contact me for any interaction. It will be my pleasure. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Tony. Thank you for that presentation and overview of agroforestry practices in that region of Brazil. We still have some time here to entertain some questions, so I'm going to open up a Q&A box here. I'd ask that folks type their questions into this Q&A box that I'm opening here, if you can all see that. There were a few questions that came during the course of the presentation, Tony, and maybe we can start with some of those. For example, Mike Gold had asked about the final spacing on the 11-year rotation that you had mentioned there. I believe it was with one of the eucalyptus in a silvopasture situation. There now you can see now some folks are typing in their questions. So if you recall, maybe Mike can retype that question, but that was one of the questions that came in about the final spacing on that 11-year rotation. It is a question coming in now, and Arno van de Bos asked if you could tell us more about energy uses of the agroforestry products.
Okay. First, Michael's question. Eucalyptus and rice and following soybean. In the beginning is 10 meters between rows of eucalyptus, and in the row, the spacing between trees of eucalyptus is usually 3 to 4 meters. So in the beginning is, let's say, 10 by 4 meters, and then you don't 4 meters is in the row is you need more spacing for the final crop, for the final trees, for the big logs. So you thin, you can do 1 or 2 thinnings in each row and get the smaller out and leave the best to the final crop. So in the end, you may have about 100 good or 100 and 150 up to 200 trees per hectare of big logs. So the second question, could you tell us about energy uses of agroforest products? Yes, eucalyptus can be used for also biomass. Then you could, and there are studies underway. One of my students did that just a few years ago, and you can plant in very narrow spacing eucalyptus, thinking about harvesting at 1 year, after 1 year of planting, and chipping all that for energy. And in between these rows, you can plant the common crops, rice and soybeans. Soybeans is very important in Brazil. So another question here is, have your colleagues done detailed financial analysis of the commercial silvopasture system in use? Yeah. In Embrapa, there are economists, and they have papers, and they have done some studies about the financial of the systems. I don't know if they go as thorough and detailed as you have done in Missouri, at the University of Missouri, but we can get some information on that if you are interested.
Yeah, sure, Tony. Well, I think we can also post any references to studies on some of these silvopasture. I do know there are some studies and thorough reviews done on some of these silvopasture systems in both the economic performance as well as the carbon accounting, carbon sequestration potential, and we can send out references to the participants here. And on that subject, maybe we can. There's a few more questions here, some from Theodore Karfakis and also from Ronald Larson. I'll steer a few your way, Tony, then I'm going to ask a question myself to you. Since we're talking about the carbon sequestration, Ronald Larson's asked about, well, carbon negativity, and he asked about the potential for carbon sequestration, whether for amendments like biochar or other potential in some of these systems. If you have any comment about that.
Yeah. Well, I don't have data or detailed information right now, but I can dig that for, if he's interested, he could send me an email or yeah, that is something that is growing because of the fast growing species we are using, the pines and eucalyptus. There is a very efficient carbon sequestration, and that fits in the programs that are supported by the government, especially since Brazil is engaging more and more in the international protocols of reducing and sequestration of emissions. And yeah, that I don't have data right now to show, but I can talk to the person you mentioned. But also I would like to address Theodore
Right. Yeah.
Carpakis uh, answer our question about the multi-layered forest gardens. Yes, in southern Brazil, and one of my friends I mentioned in my acknowledgments, Dr. Gabriela Gomes, uh, her PhD was on forest gardens in southern Brazil. So I didn't discuss that in my presentation, but it's something that exists, is traditional, and it's important, especially in rural areas and or small towns where people have the knowledge of working the land and doing and they like and that is something that is going on. Big cities, people they are divorced about on the working cultivating land. So, but I can provide some more information to Theodore if he's want to learn more about that.
Right. Tony, we'll provide you with the contact information of some of the present participants, and I think we'll return to the screen so that the participants can also see your contact information at the end here if they want to follow up with you. So as mentioned, yeah, we can follow up with the participants and both post and send some references to some of the literature out there on both the economic analysis of some of the silvopasture systems and carbon sequestration. And Tony, if we put together some of these references on forest gardening and other traditional practices in southern Brazil, Theodore was asking about comparing to some of the systems observed in other parts of Brazil, as in the Amazon, and whether these exist also in southern Brazil, in a subtropical. Yeah. Well, I think, Tony, maybe I'll just, before we close here, might steer one last question your way concerning, you did touch on the efforts to promote agroforestry systems and adoptions, and you mentioned some of the barriers to adoption and referenced some of the policies that are aimed at or favorable towards agroforestry. What last, maybe a last comment on what are some of the key steps needed to secure greater adoption, at least in this part of Brazil. The ProNAF program is a huge program. I think it's billions of dollars. But I think it comes down to, as you mentioned, not the technical knowledge and more research on the performance of systems. That data is there. It's how to strengthen the extension services and access to technical assistance and extension. And what more do you think? Anything you might comment more about how to improve extension or integrating more participation from small farmers in sort of knowledge sharing or learning feedback loops or other ways of peer-to-peer learning that might help extension and support adoption in that region of Brazil?
Okay. Well, extension for sure is one of the key parts of promoting adoption and overcoming the barriers, especially cultural barriers. And well, I would say more resources, money is necessary. And we have Embrapa that has the knowledge and develop systems and analyzes the systems, but we need also that every state in Brazil has an extension service. Extension in Brazil is not linked to the universities. Universities don't have, as in US, professionals doing extension. There is a agricultural extension service in each state. But the problem is that this extension service is mainly for agronomic crops. Only recently in Paraná, few years ago, foresters were hired to work in extension. So, and now a forester working with agronomists, they can do a much better job than agronomists alone. That's, at least in Brazil, was something we noticed when we have horticulturists and agronomists and foresters work together, they can do a better job. So I would say more money, and more professionals that can work together with the three components: cattle and agricultural crops and the trees. So, and that is happening slowly, but happening in these states, in other parts of Brazil. And Gregory, I see here Theodore asking about agroforest systems used for restoring land productivity.
Yes. Yeah, go ahead, Tony.
Yeah. Okay. Yes. And one of the agroforest systems to restore productivity is to use legumes. I mentioned briefly bracatinga, Mimosa escabrella tree, and bracatinga can do an excellent job restoring productivity even in areas that were mined, or they were, the good soil was scraped for building reservoirs, or building something that or mining. And so yeah, we have several systems that can be used for restoring land productivity and the native ecosystems, and even eucalyptus and pinus can be. We can do alley cropping and harvest later on the pines and the eucalyptus, and leave the native forest that has regenerated after a few years of establishing the initial system. And so yeah, that's something that we have data, we have information, and something that is being done. Especially because the law is requiring, and farmers have to comply and prove that they are following the law if they want borrow money, if they want loans for their work, for their production system.
Okay, well, yeah, I think, Tony, I thank you for responding to those questions. There may be a few more questions there, but I think we're a bit past the hour now, so perhaps we should wrap things up here, and encourage any of the participants who would like to follow up with Tony. His email contact is right there in the final slide. And as indicated, we will follow up with some of the references we can provide on some of the topics mentioned, such as economic analysis and carbon sequestration. So I'd like to thank you, Tony, for that presentation, and thank you for for being with us. We really appreciate your presentation, and for those who joined us today for this installment of the Agroforestry in Action webinar series. Please check our website, agroforestinaction.org, for upcoming events and webinars, and wish you a good day. Thanks so much. Bye-bye.
Okay, bye-bye, everyone.